Being a marketer's no sweat. You just have to manage dozens of channels, launch hundreds of campaigns, score thousands of leads, and okay, fine, it's a lot of sweat. Unless you have HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools to help you do all that and more. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
At the Musial with Alan and Daniel, we'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good morning and welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. With me, as always, Alan Medlock, Medlock1 on Twitter. And Alan, for the fact that this is, the off season and we haven't really even gotten into we're just kind of getting started on it. It's kind of a busy week for the Cardinals.
Yeah, it seems like there is just information that comes out daily right now. And it's, whether it's on the low key end of, just some picking up some free agents or, not extending, the qualifying offer to Goldschmidt, which we'd kind of predicted and had kind of been, they were pretty much upfront about that, to rumors of who may be staying and who may be going. And then, well, before we even get into the heart of November, we find out about the streaming service. So it's kind of been about as hectic as we've always wanted when they wanted to make these big deals.
Yeah, it's always, and for podcasters, it's always nice to have something to talk about rather than scrambling around in some sort of deep dive. Let's get to the big stuff first, kind of work our way through it. The biggest thing, maybe it's not the biggest thing. One thing is we found out that Willson Contreras, 1, wants to stay, and 2 is moving positions. I'm going to play first base / DH. And I wonder, and what do you think? What's that split going to look like? Is it going to be more first base or more DH?
Yeah, I wondered about that as well. When I started kind of break down the lineup a little bit after it was announced, and one, I understand I could probably get well, let's put it this way. I'm always looking to the bright side in these kind of moves. I actually really like this one. I feel like this is the most definitive they've been about a position change, and not necessarily that unhappy as a catcher, but to see that there can be benefits by bringing some of the other guys in, and some of the outlier numbers to show that while Contreras has been a decent catcher, they think they can improve there and keep that bat in the lineup, on a daily basis, which will be big. Probably more so as the DH. I think that this move, while it seems like, hey, let's keep him in the fold, let's get that bat in the lineup, it does point to, hey, we're going to be kind of creative on how we find some of the how we make the lineup night to night, and to find a way for some of these guys to play. Because that was the first thing that popped into my mind, as I was like, well, I love this idea. He's athletic. I mean, the idea of him playing out the outfield was thrown out, whether there was any truth to that or not.
Ooh.
But I think that this could be a doable thing. I think this is going to be a good timeshare with whether I would assume is going to be Burleson at this point, and keeps him in the lineup. And the more intriguing part of it is it shows that he wants to stay. And I think that, mixed with Mo's comments, kind of points to what you and I had been talking about. While they're trying to get out of that middling area, we do think they're going to compete in a division that they will probably be able to compete. So kind of like the end of his Cubs tenure, where you saw him more as the everyday DH in the lineup, I think you'll probably see probably a significant or probably a similar look to what the Cardinals are going to plan to do with him. But one thing is to keep him in the lineup every day. I think is going to be beneficial.
Yeah, I mean that's very likely, and the idea is that he's going to not get hurt and things of that nature. Which okay, hopefully that's the case. I mean, definitely gonna run less of a risk of that not being behind the plate. He's not going to get hit by a bat in his forearm or anything like he did last year. Um, I think maybe it's possible that this platoon might just be determined by also how he picks up the position. He's only played 50 innings at first base, and we've seen people that have moved to first base and it not work very well. I mean, we remember Jose Martinez.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
But
and
okay.
on the other side too, catchers like to block,
Mhm.
and sometimes that can be a blockade for some of the guys moving to first. But just for some of the reasons, he is not a first generation catcher anyway. He was converted to the position in the Cubs system, so there is. I mean, to me, I feel like there's a good chance that he's decent first baseman.
Yeah, I think that's very likely. But it very well may be that the Cardinals are kind of
Yeah,
hedging their bets a little bit, and
agree.
as he gets out there and starts playing first base, if it doesn't look like it's going to be working very well, they'll have him DH more and just
Yeah,
occasionally play first. Because I mean, there's gonna be a downgrade in the defense no matter who's over there,
sure,
and that's a significant thing, especially for a guy like Mason Wynn, right? I mean, Mason Wynn, not everybody can catch that fastball, and Goldie, Goldie kind of saved him a few times there with height and stretch and all that kind of stuff. So um, I think it's gonna be interesting to see what just any change, and I'm not gonna blame it on Contreras because I mean, you're right, he's probably likely to be a fine first baseman or an average first baseman, but I just wanna see what the lack of Goldschmidt's glove does to that middle infield defense because it could be significant.
yeah, yeah. It's there. I've wondered about that. I feel like even on some of the outlier, like you hear right now about some of the guys that may be interested in Goldschmidt, his defense never gets brought up. But I thought it was fantastic, and maybe one their infield's really good, but how
Mhm.
big of a role did Goldschmidt play in that is what's yet to be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that you make a good point on that. And you know, I know we'll probably get into it in a little bit. I mean, those corners both may look different, which at this point I expect the corners to be different.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that in a bit, but, before we leave Contreras, I also think it's we talked about, and not just us, of course, everybody has, how impossible it was gonna be for the Cardinals to have 3 catchers on their roster, right? And
Sure,
they had to do something, and that's one reason we thought maybe they would look to move Contreras, and Contreras has 3 years left on his deal. He could have easily said, "Hey, I'm not gonna spend 1 or 2 of those years in a rebuild type of situation or, a less than competitive situation. I wanna go ahead and move on," and the Cardinals would have probably been able to get quite a bit for him. It is a testament to saying that he wanted to stay through that, knowing that it's unlikely, but possible that his whole entire rest of his career in St. Louis, if he only plays the 3 years of the contract, would be non-competitive. I don't think that's the case, but, you run that risk. Um, but I think it shows that the Cardinals are really ready to move on to this development thing, right? They're gonna give Ivan Herrera, I would assume. I mean, they keep talking a lot about Pedro Paje, so I don't know. It may be a 50-50 split, and I'm not real excited
sure,
about that. But either way, they're giving young catchers that are coming up in the organization a shot at this, which is not what I mean, if they had done this 2 years ago, they wouldn't have even signed Contreras. So, um, I think that it's very interesting to see. I think this just goes along with those stated objectives of trying to develop people. It's just another step in that.
sure. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, I was glad to see Contreras wants to stay and wants to see it
Yeah.
through. And like I said, the rose-colored glasses to me, I want to be like, hey, if you keep a good majority of the guys that we assume are going to be traded in a division that is winnable, I still think you can be competitive. And even in a rebuild, reset, whatever we want to call it, hell, it may look just like last year. And in a situation to where your expectations are low, last year's probably a success.
Yeah.
So, we'll see how it goes. It makes a lot of sense to me to go this way. I think that we were all in agreement that they were going to move a catcher at some point, just because you have another one coming fairly
Mhm.
quickly. Is this not a situation where you give it a long-term run to on the development side to see which one of those stay, but realize that Pages could be the guy that you move on from pretty quickly if Crooks is right there knocking on the door, or vice versa? I think that the all-around game of Pages is probably going to get that. May be your opening day starter behind the plate next year, but I think that they're convinced that Herrera can hit at this level, that now they've got to focus on the defense on him. Now, another question that I want to ask is, how much of the running game do they attribute to the catching or the pitching of last year? Because I think that's a major problem that they're going to have to address. And your best arm is playing first base now, so the there's a lot of questions, and I kind of want to see. I would like to know on the development side what's going on between the two catchers, and even in a situation like this where I like to move, where you keep all three in the fold and feel and wait for Crooks to get there. Essentially, all that being said, there'll probably be a big trade in December, and it may change everything. I don't know.
I mean, you can't rule out one of those catchers being traded.
Sure,
But I don't expect it, because if Crooks had played last year at Memphis, then yeah,
agreed.
okay, you're going to talk
Agreed.
that. But I think as great as he did at Double A, winning the MVP in Springfield, um, it and given how we're doing development these days, apparently, you were guessing, I don't think they'd want to skip that. I think they'd let him play. If he came out in Memphis, well, then they've even said, right? They've even said, they're not going to let, just a great 6 weeks at Memphis get a call up, just because they could, maybe they could help the major league team. Well, maybe they just need more time at Memphis too, and give them a chance to fail at that level if they need to and rebound. So I would expect Jimmy Crooks to play all year at Memphis, unless, injuries and stuff. Maybe he gets a cup of coffee, but, he's not on the 40-man roster yet. And so yeah, so I think those guys are there, but I do think it is an evaluation year for both of them, and the Cardinals then try to determine what they want to do. Paul Hayes, to me, and it's just me. I mean, it's just a feeling, but it feels to me like he's a really, really good backup catcher, but you wouldn't want to start him all the time.
Sure.
Now you're right on the steals. And there's the change in the bases and everything else plays a role in that, right? I mean, even if Yachty really knows behind the plate, his results wouldn't be quite the same as we've seen, what we would expect from Yachty. They'd be better than what we've seen out of the other guys, but I don't think they'd be up to Yachty's level. So there's some of that. But there's also some of that is like, you know, well, we may just have to live with it, because after all that, you're still not still at home. And it just depends. I think they'd probably say, look, they're going to work on Herrera. They're going to try to get better. They're going to kind of strengthen him and work on that part of the game. But at the end of the day, you know, if he's hitting like he can hit, he's going to be the starter.
Sure. Yeah, that's it's funny. It seems like we've had this talk a lot. The
Probably.
that yeah, that backup catcher role is the backup quarterback type situation,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's always highly thought of in the Cardinals organization. And it's um you're right all the way around, but it's one of those situations to where I could see him getting the majority of the playing time just for that, and that
Hmm.
being the safety net type situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
that's who they trust the most, and in one of those situations. So it's to me is going to be interesting in how they deploy this, with my expectation being completely that it will be more Pajes and more Pages to play just about every day, and yeah, it's which kind of leads into the more DH role of Contreras and Herrera a little bit. But I think there's going to be a pretty equal timeshare, but where the development upside may be more in Herrera, I think we do see Pages more.
Yeah, and again, this feels like one of those situations where in the past we would have almost guaranteed that the Cardinals would have gone with Pages, because of whatever. But being that there's starting to be this shift in philosophy and approach, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be that way still. But I don't know that we can feel as confident about anything the Cardinals are going to do than we would have, a year or two ago, because they've there's this different focus now, and there's this different idea. Um, I think that we could have said, oh, this is guy gets off to a hot start, he's coming up. Well, actually might not have been able to still think about Burleson and Rosarena in Memphis, um, but I just think we have to, as fans, kind of reset our expectations on what the club will do until we get more data from the Heim Bloom era, as it were. Um, so yeah, I mean, it still may be Pages. I think in the past, I would almost have assumed it would have been, because the Cardinals tended to make those kind of decisions. A guy that's a little bit better overall, even though he's not really hitting, and keeping the hitting prospect down. I just don't know that that's the case anymore. We'll have to see.
Yeah, a lot of those things are going to be interesting. The historical line of thought that we've had for a long time of, hey, this is how they've done things. I want to see how much how much that'll change, and how dedicated they are to this.
Right.
So
Right.
we'll see.
We also heard that Sonny Gray is a player that wanted to stay in St. Louis, not looking to waive his no trade clause or anything of that nature. So the club seems to be going to keep him. Again, a little bit surprising, not much. I'm not real surprised, but a little bit, just because he's got 2 years on a contract plus an option year, which may or may not get picked up. And if the Cardinals are going to struggle, at least one of those years, right? I mean, this coming year, they're not supposed to be competitive. You never know, but and maybe even that next year, it could have easily seen where he's like, "Look, I thought we were going to try to win here, and I'm going to move on." Granted, he was really comfortable with location and stuff like that. That seemed to play a big role, but you know, the Braves or even the Reds I know he's played there before, but a Reds team that has now Terry Francona might have been intriguing. So it's nice to hear that he was looking to stay here.
Yeah, no, that news was the best, and then there was an Instagram post, I believe, that is one of those that you can win fans over really quickly with those kind of things, the way that he worded it, and that's to me, that's the positivity, because one thing that I didn't, I understand, the whole line of thought of how they're doing this, and I agree with the line of thought. Um, I just don't know if you can afford a blow up here, and no matter how how much people push for that. I don't think that's going to be feasible, and I think that they're going to kind of. I think that they're convinced that they could kind of ride the fence on this a little bit by playing productive guys without the pressure of the everyday pennant race for them to succeed. And I think that's the way that this is going to be directed a little bit, which tells me I think they're going to be a lot better than I think that it's going to be perceived.
Yeah.
I also, I want to see the ramifications of who else is going to stay, because to me it really sounded like it would be that Gray and Contreras were going to stay in the fold.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that there was a trade scenario that I think may be interesting, considering that the Braves were the first name linked to Evaldi. I think that could be a flip that the Cardinals could make for Gray pretty easy if they weren't 100% convinced to do it. But I don't know. Contreras coming back and the way that it happened tells me that I think there's a little more juice flowing than they want to let loose, and they want this to be a soft landing spot if they're not very good.
Yeah, and it seems like, especially with those guys, there might be a bit of a chip on the shoulder, right? Of this,
Yeah,
okay, let's go out and prove that we're not going to be as bad, that we can still win. They wanted to be part of that, but they were sold on the whole St. Louis experience, not just winning. And of course, Sonny Gray has had no problems. It's a little bit, given how Willson Contreras' career started in St. Louis last year with the whole, move him off catcher type of thing. It's almost a little bit surprising that he's not looking to go, but he really wants, to be here. I think it's always interesting and great as a fan of the team to hear that the players are really invested and want to be here, not just because it's a place they think they can win, but because it's a place they want to be at.
sure.
Um,
Yeah. Well, and it kind of rallies back to the idea that, hey, there's still a little bit of a draw here, because I think that
right.
there was a large faction, including me, a little bit, of how much it had lost its luster.
Mhm.
And I don't feel like that's true at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say that. Obviously they're not going to be going out and attracting any other free agents this year. They're not going to be looking to do that. Um, but hopefully that means that in the future when they do, that still has some pull. Obviously money talks more than anything else, but
Mm.
having an idea of that's at least someplace they want to listen and maybe consider is good. It does appear, I mean, there's nothing beneficial, and most said that they were looking to accommodate one of their veterans, um, and seeing what's out there. That seems to indicate Nolan Arenado. I mean, it could be Miles Michaelis, but again, finding a match for Michaelis is just I can't imagine. You're eating all your salary, or most of it, and then by that point in time, you're still not getting anything back. I don't in a year where you're not expected to be competitive anyway. Um, I don't know if it's worth all that. It can be argued one way or another. But Nolan, I mean, one, I continue to hope that Nolan Arenado stays as a Cardinal. I understand the financial aspects and roster aspects and all that, but I've been a Nolan fan since before he came to St. Louis. So to have him, and I would really love to see him be able to win in St. Louis. And so I hope that this will, hope that doesn't happen. But it does sound like they're at least, you know, testing the waters, and
Sure.
to the point that if they can find a trade that they like, they'll take it to Nolan and see if he's interested. Um, it would appear then that he's kind of expanded his, if this is all true. I mean, again, we're kind of making some assumptions because nobody's reported any of this that
Yeah.
I have seen, at least. But if this is all true, that it would seem to when he left Colorado, it was St. Louis or Los Angeles. I would expect that he's expanded his, possibilities. Since then, I don't think that it would limit it to just Los Angeles. Um, and I don't imagine that if something doesn't happen, I think he would probably still be fine in St. Louis. I don't think we're going to get a lot of the kind of comments he got maybe he made when he was leaving Colorado, or the frustrations that he had in Colorado. Um, but and I'm still hoping that he's still in St. Louis. But I mean, what do you think?
Um, w- I've gotten to the point now to where I feel like you need to make the move. Um, wouldn't be disappointed if he came back, but maybe there's egg on our face, and that's not who they've been talking about this whole time. But I do think that it was notable that that was the name that was not brought up.
Well, yeah.
Here's my line of thinking on this. Um, two things last year offensively, I felt like were the things that sunk the team. First of all, I felt like your stars weren't stars.
Mhm.
Um, you see that Goldschmidt wasn't that they felt like that was a move that they needed to make, that you're going to cost save no matter what he's meant to the ball club, you're willing to let him walk. Um, I think that if you get a favorable return, whether money relief, which probably not going to happen, or if you can just bring somebody over, I feel like you need to make the move. The second flip to me that I thought really hurt them last year was the fact that the other two pillars of your lineup, potentially Gorman and Walker, didn't hit either. One, there's a lot of runway with those two guys left. And I think that that's the move that you have to make, and you have to start figuring out a way to make them comfortable defensively to where that's going to help them offensively. As big as an Arenado fan as I am, and I love the move, this is one that I almost want to see made at this point. And I say that just because I think I have no doubt he's going to go to LA and have a huge year. But I think the gamble for him to have age regression and have another season similar to what this was, where it could be decent on a team like St. Louis right now. I think the benefit of what you're trying to sell is the development process. I think you need to hit the two that you think are going to be your next studs regardless. That being said, it's a situation where I'm like, I feel like this is a Dodgers or bust type trade. And whether that happens or not, I don't know. They're already looking for infield help, which tells you one thing. Lux is an odd man out. If you could maybe switch him out, and I know that may go into the department of redundancy of what you already have, but to me, that he's arbitration eligible in 25. And if you were able to flip that in some way, I think that you have to do it. All of that's purely speculative, and he'll end up in Boston being Arenado. I don't know. But at this point, I feel like that's a move that you almost have to make. If you don't, I still think you're going to be as competitive. I think you're going to be as competitive with him or without him. And which I think that they've put themselves in a good situation for that. But to me, I just feel like that's almost a move that's being it's almost now at this point feels like that's going to happen.
And you're probably right. I do think that I mean, I don't know how to say this. When you look at it from the business side of things and from the development side of things and all that kind of stuff makes sense, and I get that. But when you look at it like, wanting that continuity, wanting that players that you want to root for, and I don't know. I mean, because if Nolan goes, there's not anybody really left. I mean, there's nobody with any kind of seniority, right? I mean, the I guess maybe Contreras because of his overall career, which is, I mean, what I'm really getting at here anyway. But it just, I mean, it's a very young team, which is not a bad thing, but you always like to have, it's like when we had Wainwright and Yachty forever, or things like that. Just having that touchstone that is part of the fan experience there. And that's not a overriding factor, obviously. And if it hurts the team, you have to move on. Although depends on you could ask, you wonder about Yachty's last year or Matt Carpenter's return. But yeah, I feel like they lose some sort of intangible, benefit there, which is probably just me saying this kind of stuff. But that's kind of what I would feel. And of course, Cardinals have always said, they've had a Hall of Famer on their roster every year since 1906 or something like that. If you don't have a Nolan Arenado on your roster next year, do you have that person? I mean, you never know for sure, but I mean, would Contreras be a Hall of Famer? Would Wynn be a Hall of Famer? Could somebody just completely develop? You could be some rookie. Yeah, I mean, it could happen, but that might be where that line breaks, and that would be weird.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you completely, and that's an angle that I didn't look at, but I do wonder where I think they're going to be competitive with what they have. Mm-hmm. Are you and I both talking ourselves into the middling aspect of it? You know what I mean? That we've pushed against for so long.
I mean, maybe. I also, and I'm still not 100% sure what you get back from Nolan. I mean,
sure.
And I don't know. I don't know that moving him just to free up roster space is worth it because I think he's still more valuable than that.
Sure, sure.
Um, I mean, I get that you could move Gorman to third or Walker to third and maybe get them more development, but I don't know that that would counteract what you're losing. Again, if it's just basically a salary dump. And I don't know, and maybe Nolan's market is better than that. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely not what it was when the Cardinals got him, and you saw what the Cardinals sent to Colorado. Different situation because there were not bidders and all that kind of stuff, but still, Austin Gomber's still out there, but Montero, who was the big prospect in that thing, just signed with Japan, I think. Just like never panned out. Um, I can't remember how the other ones were on there. I mean, Gomber's about the only thing they've gotten out of that, and it's been okay for a Colorado pitcher, but it's Colorado pitching. Um, so what are you going to get back? It might not be very much. Are you going to save him a lot of money? It's hard to know with that contract.
Yeah,
You're still going to have to pay some of it, and Colorado's paying some of it, and you lose that deferral. I don't know what that means. I just that's part of what my drawback on the whole thing is. I just don't know that you're gonna if you just were trading, Nolan Arenado, the name and the person and everything that it was 3 years ago, okay, yeah, you probably have to do that because you're gonna get back a lot. But the Nolan Arenado we've seen over the last couple of years, I just don't know what people are gonna pay for that.
yeah. No, I mean it's a valid point. I mean that's there. Yeah, I would think the one thing are we. I know that guys go and succeed in other places, and
Mhm.
that has really put a spotlight on the lack of development that the Cardinals have. But one thing that I don't know. I think that you and I share the same mindset, and we may not. I don't know. Mo is good at these trades. And I would think that he's going to have to make this pretty much perfect for the Cardinals to move. And to me the optimism that I come up with that we have it could be a situation of of now is it going to be better with the Bloom influence to where on the outskirts this deal may not look great, but in a year it may be fantastic. In a year and a half, I don't know. But that's kind of my mindset on it to be like, hey, one of the things that we've seen that's gone well for them is some of these trades like this that take a lot of work actually turn out pretty well for the Cardinals, and I think that they would have to make it pretty much perfect to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Of course, they've obviously not traded off anybody like this.
Yeah,
They brought in, when they brought in Goldschmidt, they brought in Arenado, especially Arenado. Arenado pretty much wanted to come to St. Louis. I mean, that I think really impacted, what happened there. I mean, Mo made the contract details work, but the value of the players that went was less because there was no open market. Goldschmidt was an interesting case too. I felt like they got how much of that was negotiation on most part to get the prices down, or the fact he was just coming off free, he's going to be out to be a free agent, and I don't know. They struck early. I'm not really sure how that worked. They did. You would definitely have to say that was a success, even though Goldschmidt's tenure in St. Louis was not all that we thought it would be. It
sure.
was still a successful trade. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that means. I also know, we've seen some interesting trades from Mo that have looked good at the time and then not panned out at all. But he's also often been on the buying side. So, the one time last year at the trade deadline that he did the selling, you know, different. It's a hard thing to do, but he got pieces back that were
Yeah. Well,
at
and
least valuable.
no, I agree. I agree, and that I would think that here in the next year or so that's the grade's going to be pretty big on that. But to flip into that, I mean, I feel like one of those trade pieces is maybe pushing. I wouldn't say necessarily pushing him out the door, but will be an option if Arno leaves into JC. So you're thinking, well, it may be a win-win here, and the you know I just feel like there's a lot of egg on their face right now, and they're going to do what's right, and I think that things are going to look a lot better.
Yeah, and it's probably true. And I mean, I understand, pretty much understand whatever they do, because it makes sense. And I'm not gonna. I don't think. I don't think you're gonna get the torches and pitchforks out. Whether he stays, whether he goes, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what the return is. I think. If they paid all his salary and got nothing, that's one thing, but that's not gonna happen. So, um, yeah, I think it's the problem. I mean, this is gonna be a cloud over the team for quite some time, right? I mean, I don't want to say a cloud, but I mean, we're all gonna be talking. It's gonna be this focus. We're gonna hear all these rumors about all these teams going to, like we've even seen, like I think the Yankees talking about him, or some of these other teams that might be interested in him, and you know, until we know, we're just gonna hear a lot of that kind of stuff that he may not even be moving, and I don't I kind of wonder if, because we've seen this somewhat before, right? The buzz that goes around these people, if he doesn't get traded after a point, after we hear all this, buzz and talk, and who may be this and who may be that, and then he doesn't get moved if there's not some disappointment and
What
lashback on him.
and you know what that I've thought about that in my own mind. One of the
Mhm.
things that I mean, listen, I love Arenado. I mean, he's a guy that I saw come through Tulsa. You knew that he was going to be a stud. All those things. So I don't want to feel like that's a move that I want to see just for the sake of movement, and that I'm
Right,
not a fan. I don't
right.
want that to look at. One of the reasons I would rather do it is do it now instead of hearing the trade rumor every day that's going to happen throughout the season. If they're a middling 500 team and you're like, okay, it just should have been done in the offseason if this is where you're going to be. And I understand that's the gamble, but
Mhm.
still, a lot of that's to me is just to path the least resistance and not hear it all year.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, and I agree with that. That would be kind of an annoying drumbeat. However, you know, if you can make a deal like that at the trade deadlines, maybe you're getting more
Out of
back.
desperation, you're
I
right.
mean, especially if he's having a good year. Now, you also run the risk that he's not having a good year, right? And then you're kind of still stuck. Um, so I don't know. I figure that if they can get a deal done that's acceptable to him, he'll be gone. And that whole Nolan Goldie era, I mean, you really kind of sit down and look at it, but because I don't think we all expect it to be over this quickly. Um, but it just never. I mean, 22 was great, but other than that, it just never panned out, right? We kept talking about on the shows how one would be hot and one would be cold, and they never seemed to very rarely click until 22 when they were both MVP candidates, and that's a team that you still wonder if Ryan Helsley's finger doesn't get hurt at the last weekend, does that team go on a run? And does that change the whole face of what we're talking about now? If the Cardinals have made it to the NLCS in 2022 or even the World Series, are they even with a terrible 23, are they as interested in making these changes if they had that kind of postseason success to point to? I mean, that's going down a rabbit hole, but yeah, it's very interesting that we thought Goldschmidt and Arenado would just bring this kind of golden age or something to St. Louis, and it just never really clicked.
Yeah, if it's a funny situation to where all we ever asked for years was that second bat. You
Yep,
remember?
yep,
It was
yep.
like you need that second bat, then you need that third bat. And now it's you're just like, hey, let's just throw everything against the wall and see what sticks.
Mm,
Type scenario.
mhm.
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit disappointing. I mean, and here's some of my mindset too, which isn't going to be highly popular. Um, as large of a fan of I am of Arenado, they're not winning with him either.
No.
And I would say I I don't know if disappointing is the right term to use, but it, I think that you probably the expectation of World Series is tough. I mean
Yeah.
but so I don't want to set it at that. But you also didn't think you'd be lapped by the Brewers in that amount of time in the division, and I think that stealing from some of the Cardinals' mindset to how they developed how they developed an organization has been a little bit of embarrassment to St. Louis, just because they've been lapped in the development process, because they
Mhm.
took those tools of what St. Louis did, where the next guy up always succeeded. That's what happens in Milwaukee now, and now on the Cardinal side of it, it rarely happens.
Right.
That being said, I mean, that's not Arenado's fault. It's not Goldschmidt's fault. I mean, Goldschmidt had an MVP season,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, you do. There's no other way to look at it, that you didn't win a pennant with him. You
Yeah.
didn't win a division with them, and that's a little tough to take, con- considering what the expectations were after the moves were made.
Yeah. Oh, and I saw some reference to this on Twitter, so I thought I'll ask you, and I'll ask about both of them, Goldschmidt and Arenado. I'm not going to talk about their Cooperstown Hall of Fame. I'm talking about Cardinals Hall of Fame chances. And again, it's hard to say this because it's a fan vote, and fans do what fans do. But should, I guess, Goldie and Arenado be in the Cardinal Hall of Fame? Now,
Man, that's a good question.
while you think about it, I'll hit some statistics at least. Goldschmidt's 6 years here, 153 homers, LPS of 843, which was about 100 points lower than his Arizona time. Nolan's been here 4 years, 187 home runs, has a 797 OPS, which again about 100 less than Colorado, but you kind of expected that too. The Goldschmidt had his MVP, Nolan had his, second runner up. Both of them have had Gold Gloves. I'm not sure if both of them had Silver Sluggers. They probably have. But never won anything. And I mean, especially if Nolan's done, it's 4 years, so it's a very short period of time. And Goldie's 6 years includes 2020, which was 2020. So I mean, again, if you're just looking at if you don't put it, you put the fan vote aside, because I think if you put both those guys on a ballot, they probably get in. But if you're just looking at the numbers, do you think that they would both get a red jacket?
I mean, my gut on both is a no,
Mm,
but I'm not really certain.
yeah.
Why does it feel like the Freeze? I don't know why I feel this way, but when Freeze turned it down, it kind of changed my whole perspective on the red jacket.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, I know that it comes with a certain, I don't know how to say it. It still means a lot to me,
Yeah.
but I don't I don't know why. Maybe I'm just scorned by it, but I don't know how to explain it. I
Yeah.
feel like I feel like just due to the playoff success of Freeze, that's a guy that deserves it. Hometown
Mhm.
kid, one of those type of
Right.
situations. To where now I just don't want them to. Yeah, you agreed to the trade or you sign an extension that you're gonna go in. You know what I mean by that? And I don't know how the numbers play out to where it does with everybody else. But I also don't want to sound like a scorn fan that things didn't turn out the way that I wanted it to be with them either. So I don't know. I mean, but just initial question, I want to say no, but in 10 years that may be different.
David Freese was here 5 years. Um, he hit regular season 44 homers, had a 783 OPS. So his numbers per se weren't as good as I don't think either Goldie or Arenado. But he did have the big moment, and like you said, hometown guy. I think that's when he looks at his career like that, he that's why he turned it down, right? I mean, it's what he
Yeah,
said. He just didn't feel like
sure.
he was in that range. In the statistic, if he's there for game 6 and well, that whole postseason, but mainly game 6, right? He's there for one game. And I think that's even though his Cardinal career was fine and good, if he didn't have those, he wouldn't have been elected in.
Yeah.
So I think that's where he came from, and I understand that. And they're remarkably aware of himself, I guess, there in that regard. I think, I look at Scott Rowland, who had 6 years in St. Louis. Now, granted, Scott Rowland played on some of the best teams the Cardinals have had. So there's that. But his numbers are probably in line with Goldschmidt's and Arnold. I mean, factor in different eras and all that kind of stuff. But so, and obviously, Scott Rowland is beloved, right, in St. Louis, even though he played a number of teams after that. And his ending in St. Louis was not nearly as cordial as either one of these guys. He kind of forced his way out. He said, I gotta go. He and Tony. So I don't know. I feel like both of these guys have legitimate I can't remember. I think St. Louis's rule is 3 years in St. Louis is the minimum for the Hall of Fame, not 5. If it's 5, obviously Nolan can't. If Nolan leaves this year, he can't make it in but I think it's 3. And so I would say at some point in time, both those guys are red jacket guys. Now, are they guys like most of those red jackets that you immediately think of as a Cardinal? I don't know that that's going to happen, but I do think that, for what they did do here, that they probably get in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it would surprise me if they weren't at some point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, we got a little bit of time left, but let's shift to off the field, because that was the bigger news of the honestly, maybe the biggest news of the week, at least for some people. The Cardinals signed an agreement, modified their agreement basically with what used to be Bally's, now is FanDuel Sports Midwest, which is a mouthful to say. But basically they agreed to it. They're taking a reduction in the money that they were due, but they've added streaming rights into this. So it sounds like, and again, there's still a lot of details that aren't out there, but it sounds like you will be able to pay X amount of dollars a month or a year to use the FanDuel app and watch the Cardinals, even if you are in market with no blackouts. And again, y'all know I haven't watched it 2 years in part because of being in that would be huge if that's what's actually going to happen.
Yeah, I thought of you first on the announcement, just because there was the best podcasts and baseball guys have been great about this, and they've been kind of mapping out things that this was going to work and how it would, and how it's going to eliminate some of the dark areas that we have, parts of the country that they get 0 Cardinals games because they're blacked out of
Right.
6 different markets, and how one of their rules is they're going to try to eliminate those. So right now there's 2 different ways to watch. You can either stream or cable, and that's good for me. I'm hoping that I get the streaming option. I'm not so certain here, but we do have a network that does carry it. We have one of the which would be the FanDuel now on our cable broadcast. But I did literally think of you first, because I thought, okay, this is the best case scenario. Stream, do it when you want, and get to watch what you love.
Right.
So I hope it works out. I felt like this was a highly positive development, being 2 of the potentially 3 teams that this is going to affect, and it's between the Braves, Cardinals, and potentially the Marlins, which I think is coming, are going to be the first 3 teams to offer it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look and see if the Braves and Marlins have added their digital rights to this, because that was the key to this thing, is the Cardinals had kept their digital rights as part of their deal until redoing it this week.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I've been watching, I've been rooting for Diamond Sports to go bankrupt and now have to stop. Because I really thought that that was going to be the best thing for the Cardinals is to be able to get out and do their own. And I'm a little bit surprised. I'm a little bit surprised they went this route. Um, they could have easily gone and done what MLB has done. Go to their, go on MLB, let them produce it. They could have gone their own way. They've got a little bit of this kind of stuff in house. They've got a television. They do their television, that Cardinal Insider show, and it's not the same as doing games, but some of the infrastructure that's there for um, FanDuel Sports Midwest, they would be able to rely on. They would be able to, some of those be able to use the same kind of people and all that kind of stuff. It cost them money. And maybe that's really what it boiled down to right now when they're trying to focus on investment in players in the development process. They didn't want to then try to be spending money investing in an infrastructure to bring games to people. I don't know. But it is interesting. I don't remember if I saw how long the contract was supposed to run. I don't think it said. Um, and of course, it all could go south if FanDuel walked away from things. I mean, we saw that with the Padres and Diamondbacks and stuff like that. So, in a year or two, if for some reason this wasn't profitable, then or Diamond was having trouble, this might not be the end of it. I guess is what I'm saying. But it's a good first step, and it's something that's quite exciting. I will have to wait for the pricing. I hope that it's not more than. I'd like it to be less than $20 a month. I hope it's not any more than that. I also hope there's a one time yearly fee to be paid too. And I guess the question is going to be, we've heard this. I've seen this on there as well, and maybe you have some thoughts. Is this a package that's going to include the Blues? Or is that going to be something separate? Or, you pay 6 months for the Cardinals, and then if you want the Blues, you pay for another 6 months. I don't, I mean, again, a lot of details that still need to be worked out, but it's kind of interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that I read somewhere where this initial one, the rollout was based of what the Blues had done with the NHL, and then what the Braves had kind of led the way with MLB. So it's going to kind of
Okay.
be a mix between them. I do not know if the Blues are going to be involved, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was something long term that happens.
Now, if you're out of market, I mean, you still just MLB is your option, MLB TV, because if you're out of market, you'll still get the Cardinals like you have been, and you get all the other games, and the cost is going to be pretty comparable.
Yeah.
Um, if you're in market, and you want MLB TV, you're going to have to do both. You're going to have to do MLB TV, and then you're going to have to do the FanDuel. That's not going to be. You're not going to be able to. I'm not going to be able to get into the MLB TV app and watch the Cardinals because it's. I'm going to have to get into the FanDuel app and watch it. It's just
Yeah.
annoying and extra fee, but you know that's the way it goes. But at least it's an option, and that's.
Sure.
I feel like I thought it would be winter warm up because I also thought they'd be doing their own thing. Um, and it may be winter warm up before we find the actual details of this thing,
Yeah.
um, and can start paying for it. But I don't know. It was a nice surprise to see that come out this week.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, to go back to the first of the show, I feel like there has been a bunch of information crammed into this. Not at the show, but the off season so far,
Right.
of things that I just didn't anticipate. I thought things would move a little bit slower, and now we
Hmm.
move up to our, we have, 30 days from the winter meetings, and non-tenders are coming up, and and there's some movement. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's all we've asked for.
Yeah. And again, it always gives us something to talk about, which is a
Yeah.
very very important thing. It's a lot a lot harder to. At least we don't feel like we're rambling about the same stuff
Well,
when
and
we're
yeah, no
doing
one wants
stuff.
to hear about a flooded baseball office.
This
You
is
know what I
true.
mean?
This is
So,
All right. Well, assuming news continues, Al and I will probably be with you next week. Although I will also have started Christmas decorating, so
yep.
we'll have to play it by ear over the next couple of weeks and see how things go. But if there's news, we'll get it done. And until then, for Alan, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Good night.
Now Nolan with a chance to give the Cardinals a lead for the first time tonight. Which he does. Is it gone? Yes! Down the left field line by Roland. His third home run in this LCS.